I want to start by saying that I loved Eleanor Voss. I want to make that very clear before I tell you what I found out about her. Because everything that follows, every unsettling, impossible, skin-crawling detail, is wrapped around the fact that this woman was kind to me for 26 years. And that kindness, I now realize, may have been the most terrifying thing about her. My name is Simone Archer. I'm 34 years old and I grew up in a small town called Millhaven, Tennessee. Population just under 4,000. The kind of place where everybody knows your dog's name and your grandmother's maiden name and exactly how you take your coffee. The kind of place where nothing strange is supposed to happen. Eleanor Voss lived in the White House at the end of Sycamore Lane for as long as anyone in Millhaven could remember. And I mean that literally. I was 8 years old the first time I met her. My mom had sent me down the street with a plate of Christmas cookies as a neighborly gesture. We'd just moved in 6 houses down. And Eleanor had answered the door in a cream-colored blouse, silver hair pinned neatly at the back of her neck, and the most perfectly smooth skin I had ever seen on a woman who appeared to be in her late 60s. She smelled like lavender and something else underneath it, something older, like the inside of an antique store, sweet and heavy and just slightly wrong. She smiled at me and said, "You must be the Archer girl. I've been expecting neighbors for a while." I was 8. I thought that was a perfectly normal thing to say. I was wrong. My mother adored Eleanor immediately. Most people did. She was elegant and soft-spoken and always seemed genuinely interested in whatever you had to say. She remembered every detail about your life from the last conversation, no matter how much time had passed. She baked. She kept an immaculate garden. She drove a spotless 1987 Buick LeSabre that she'd apparently owned for decades and maintained with almost obsessive care. She never had visitors. She never left for holidays. She never seemed to age. That last part I didn't consciously register for a long time. You don't when you see someone regularly. Change happens so gradually that your brain just adjusts. But when I was about 22 and home from college for Thanksgiving, I was flipping through old photo albums with my mom, and I stopped on a picture from our first Christmas in Millhaven. There was Eleanor, standing at her front door accepting the cookie plate from 8-year-old me. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I looked up at my mother and said, "Mom, does Eleanor look different to you from then to now?" My mother took the album, studied the photo, and laughed a little uncomfortably. "She must have good genes," she said, and then she turned the page. But I kept thinking about it. I started paying attention after that, really paying attention. I started looking at Eleanor the way you look at a math problem you can't quite solve, searching for the variable you're missing. She moved the same, stood the same. The silver hair was always the same length, always pinned the same way. The skin on her hands, and I started specifically watching her hands, showed none of the spots or loosening that I saw in every other woman her apparent age in Millhaven. Her eyes were sharp and pale gray and completely clear. I told myself it was good genetics. I told myself some people just age well. I went back to my life in Nashville, where I was working as a junior copywriter for a small advertising agency, and I pushed the thought down, where I kept all the things I didn't want to examine too closely. Then my mother got sick. It was the spring I turned 31. Breast cancer, caught late, progressing fast. I moved back to Millhaven to help take care of her. And within a week of being home, Eleanor was at our door with soup and a casserole dish, and that same soft, attentive expression she had always worn. She sat with my mother for hours. She held her hand and listened, and said exactly the right things at exactly the right moments, and I watched her do it, and felt both grateful and deeply inexplicably uneasy. One evening after my mother had fallen asleep, I walked Eleanor to the door, and she paused on the porch and looked at me with those pale gray eyes, and said, "She's going to need you to be strong, Simone. The ones we love always need that from us, even when it costs us everything." I nodded. I thanked her. I told myself the strange feeling in my chest was just grief. But later that night I lay awake and thought about the word she had used. Ones, plural. The ones we love. Like she had loved many people. Like she had watched many people get sick and need someone to be strong. And then, what? What came after for Eleanor? who apparently never left and never changed, and never seemed to accumulate any of the weight that living was supposed to put on a person. I started asking around town, carefully, the way you ask when you don't want people to think you're asking. I talked to Herb Paulson at the hardware store, who was 71 years old and had lived in Millhaven his entire life. I mentioned Eleanor casually, said she'd been so kind about my mother, and watched his face do something complicated. Eleanor's been on that street a long time, he said, longer than most people think about. I asked what he meant. He got quiet for a moment, straightening a row of paint cans that didn't need straightening. Then he said, "My daddy used to talk about her, said she was already in that house when he was a boy, said she used to bring soup when people got sick back then too." The uncomfortable kind of laugh people use to put distance between themselves and something that unsettles them. His father had been born in 1931. I drove home with my hands tight on the wheel and that electric prickling feeling across the back of my neck that I had learned, in the weeks since moving home, to pay attention to. 3 days later I went to the Millhaven Public Library, and I asked the archivist, a meticulous woman named Donna, who had been cataloging local history for 40 years, whether they had any photographic records from the early to mid-20th century. Newspaper archives, community records, anything like that. Donna brought me 4 large archival boxes and a pair of white cotton gloves, and left me alone at a table in the back of the library. I don't know exactly what I was looking for. I told myself I was being irrational. I told myself I would find nothing and feel relieved, and go home and sit with my mother, and stop following this thread that was making me feel like the ground under my feet was not entirely solid. The third box contained a folder of photographs from a 1943 Millhaven community fundraiser, a church event. Long tables in a summer field, women in cotton dresses, men in shirt sleeves, children running between the tables. I went through them slowly, one by one, and then I stopped. In the background of a photo dated July 1943, 80 years ago, standing slightly apart from the crowd near the tree line at the edge of the field, was a woman in a cream-colored blouse with silver hair pinned neatly at the back of her neck. The same woman. The exact same woman. I am not prone to dramatic reactions. I did not gasp or drop the photograph. I sat very still for a very long time and looked at that image and felt something fundamental shift inside me. Like a door I had always assumed was a wall had just swung open a crack. She was not looking at the camera. She was looking at someone just out of frame, and on her face was an expression I recognized immediately, because I had seen it many times on my own porch and in my own living room. That soft, attentive, perfectly measured expression of patient interest, like she had all the time in the world, because she did. I took a photo of the photograph with my phone. I sat in the library parking lot for 20 minutes. Then I drove home. I did not go to see Eleanor that day, or the next day. I needed to think. I needed to decide what I actually believed and what I was going to do with it. But Eleanor came to me. She knocked on my door that evening with a small pot of tea and a tin of shortbread, and when I opened the door, her pale gray eyes moved over my face with that sharp, clear intelligence, and I saw something flicker in them. Just for a moment, there and gone. She knew. She knew that I knew something. I let her in because I didn't know what else to do. We sat at the kitchen table and drank tea and talked about my mother's progress and the garden and the weather. And the whole time I was watching her hands around the teacup and thinking about a summer field in 1943 and a woman standing at the edge of the tree line watching people she had no business still knowing. Finally, when the tea was almost gone, Eleanor set down her cup and looked at me very directly and said, "You've been to the library." Not a question. I held her gaze. My heart was hammering, but my voice came out steady. "I found a photo," I said, "from 1943. She was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a car passed on the street. Inside, the clock on the kitchen wall ticked. Then she smiled, and it was the same smile she had always given me. Warm and genuine and impossibly patient. "I wondered when one of you would finally look," she said. "One of you." I asked her what she was. She tilted her head slightly, the way she always did when she was considering how to answer something. I am exactly what I appear to be, she said. A neighbor. Someone who has lived on this street for a very long time and who intends, if possible, to continue doing so. I asked her how long. She looked at the window, at the dark outside. Since before this house was built, she said quietly. Since before this town had a name. I asked her what she needed from the people on this street, from my family, from my mother. She looked back at me then, and for just a moment, just one single moment, the warmth in those pale gray eyes receded, and I saw something underneath it that was ancient and still and utterly without apology. Nothing you weren't giving freely, she said, and then the warmth came back, and she picked up her teacup. I have thought about that answer every single day since she said it. Nothing you weren't giving freely. I have thought about every dinner my mother invited her to, every holiday she spent on our porch, every conversation, every confidence shared, every moment of genuine human warmth extended to a woman who had been collecting those moments, from this street, from this town, for longer than anyone alive could comprehend. I don't know what she is exactly. I have read enough to know that the creature of European folklore, the one that kills, the one that burns in sunlight, the one that cannot enter without invitation, does not map cleanly onto Eleanor Voss, who grows roses in full afternoon sun, and who I have never seen harm a single person in 26 years of knowing her. But I also know that something is being taken, slowly, subtly, in amounts too small to notice until you step back far enough to see the shape of it. Eleanor stood at the graveside, in a black dress, with her silver hair pinned neatly at the back of her neck, and wept with what appeared to be genuine grief. And maybe it was. Maybe after 80 years on the same street, whatever she feels is real in the way that matters. I stayed in Millhaven. I still live 6 houses down from that white house. And Eleanor still brings soup when people are sick. She still waves from the driveway. She still smells like lavender and something older underneath. Last week she knocked on my door with shortbread, and we sat at the same kitchen table and drank tea, and she asked about my job and my life, and listened with that complete, focused attention that has always made people on this street feel uniquely seen. And when she was leaving, she paused at the door, the same way she always pauses, and turned back to look at me. You know, she said quietly, the ones who find out always have a choice. I asked her what the choice was. She smiled. Whether to leave, she said, or whether to stay and simply know. She walked back down the porch steps into the dark. And here's the twist that keeps me awake at night. Here's the part I haven't told anyone until right now. I'm not afraid of her. And I think that might be exactly what she wants. I think the knowing, the sitting across from her with the full weight of what she is, and choosing to pour the tea anyway, I think that might be the most potent thing she feeds on. Not blood, not fear, complicity, the warm, willing, wide-eyed complicity of someone who knows the truth and stays anyway. I'm writing this for my kitchen table in Millhaven, Tennessee. My kettle is on. Eleanor's porch light is on, across the way, like it always is. And there's a knock at my door. I don't know how to end this post, because I don't know how to end this story. I'm still here. And every time I think about leaving, I think about those pale gray eyes and that patient smile and the way she said the ones who find out always have a choice. And I think about the fact that I have not left, not yet, maybe not ever. I think she knows that too. She's always known everything about this street, and now somehow that feels less like a warning and more like a welcome.